So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Safe Workplaces Dialogues. I am Srimoy, and I lead the legal and content team at Lawcubator. I'll be your moderator for today's session. For those who are joining us for the first time, Lawcubator is a workplace compliance platform that helps organizations build safe and compliant workplaces. At the heart of our platform is a secure complaint redressal system that allows organizations to handle sensitive issues like sexual harassment with confidentiality and transparency. We also offer a wide range of e-learning courses on topics like PoSH, workplace ethics, intellectual property awareness, DEI, and more. So today's topic is PoSH in action, best practices, and common pitfalls. We are very fortunate to be joined today by two inspiring women who have been at the forefront of driving safer, more inclusive workplaces. Let me introduce them. We have with us Akansha Kamte. She's a distinguished legal professional and director at Digi Samvad with over 15 years of experience in compliance and legal strategy across international markets. She specializes in PoSH, among other things, and has designed and delivered comprehensive training modules for IC and employees. Akansha also brings expertise in intellectual property, M&A initiatives, and cybersecurity, helping organizations strengthen their workplace safety, data protection, and compliance frameworks. We are very happy to have you, Akansha. Welcome. We also have with us Sarita Narisetti. She's an accomplished HR leader with over 2 decades of experience in people management, talent development, and strategic HR transformations. A postgraduate in human resources from Osmania University with advanced leadership training from IIM Lucknow, she has held key roles at Megasoft, Purple Talk, and Not Solutions. Currently, she serves as the Director of Human Resources at Solugenics India, where she also plays an active role as a member of the PoSH Internal Committee. With global HR exposure across the US, Middle East, and Asia, Sarita blends empathy and strategy to drive impactful people practices. Welcome, Sarita. We are very fortunate to have you both with us today.
Thank you, Shri.
So we'll start with round one, which is about the prevention. Now, we all know that prevention is the heart of the PoSH Act, whether it's policies, awareness, and culture. But often implementation throws up dilemmas. So the first question for you, Akansha, would be, we have seen that many organizations opt for gender-neutral PoSH policies, even though the PoSH Act specifically protects women. So from your perspective, is this becoming an industry standard, and what is your take on it? What's your recommendation? Over to you, Akansha. You're not audible, Akansha. Can you?
Now am I audible?
You are.
So thank you for the question, Shri. And yes, I often get this question: why is our India government so biased? So I always tell them that you need to go to the history of why this entire PoSH Act was enacted, and it was enacted because of Banwari Devi and Vishakha case, as we all know. And those were at those times, India was not very pro to non gender neutral policies, and it was female oriented harassments that were taking place. Also, when we say that, we need to understand that it's government of India who needs to take care of the entire nation, even the remote places where still unfortunately we have not reached the level of being neutral biased or gender biased, right? So gender neutral something is still there. So if India has to protect everyone, they will have to have a act which will be focused morely on the females. And therefore, the act stands at its place. But definitely now the city or maybe the some parts of India are developing and developing at a very fast pace because of lots of exposures of MNCs that are coming up. And in that case, definitely I support that there has to be a neutral, gender neutral policies for the harassments as well. But that doesn't mean that I endorse to take away the posh exclusivity for a female that has been given up, considering that we are a vast nation and everybody needs those kind of protection. So yes, the industry is being biased, but it needs to be understand that this biasness or this trend is mostly the location or the geographical trend that I have seen. Mostly also in it is mostly the industry based trend. So if you say in the factories, will gender neutral policy work? I doubt about it. So the females in the factories or who are working on the workshop or at the grassroots level, will the gender neutral policy work for them? I have my doubts. But if you ask me for an MNCs, yes, definitely it will work for them. So it is basically that you need to understand your industry and the need and the location that you are into and think about then how to draft the policies for your own organization is the takeaway.
Understood. So it is still industry specific, but
Yes,
in most corporates, we see an incline towards gender neutral policies. Hopefully, we'll see that soon for manufacturing
yeah, yeah.
companies.
Definitely, definitely waiting for it. Also, I think we have proposed a new PoSH bill where it says it should be gender neutral, but it's wait and watch.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Akansha, for making it very clear. Uh, Sarita, the first question for you would be, at Solugenics, how is PoSH training structured? For instance, are new joinees mandated to undergo training, and what ongoing measures are followed to ensure that awareness stays alive beyond a one-time session?
Yeah, so it's a pretty good question, Shri. In our company, POSH awareness starts on day one. Right? Every new employee attends a mandatory session during the onboarding phase itself, right? Which is basically classified with an SLA of anywhere between 15 to 30 days. And we also have an annual e-learning refresher course that helps us track completion digitally because gone are those days where we have to send out multiple follow-ups to multiple departments, chase them to complete their training, ensure that all this feedback is captured in an Excel file because this is a compliance for us, right? We are expected to report this compliance annually, right? And the second piece of your question, we ensure that we keep the message alive, right? Because on the day one, the training is taken and it's forgotten, right? Whether we want to accept it or not, but that's the reality of corporate life, right? So we try to ensure that we run regular mailers, right? Email campaigns, and we also have the billboards in the designated areas in our office, which is more like a quick read and a refresher for the employees that uh, what to do, what not to do, especially the do's and don'ts, right? And also where to report, right? When you come across any such kind of grievances, within your circle, with your team, or in any other department. So I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. Perfect. I mean, I don't think there's anything else that an organization can do. I hope we have many HRs and IC members in the audience, and definitely worth noting what you are doing at Solugenics. Thanks for sharing it. Moving on to round two. So from policies, we discuss about the committee that anchors them. That is the internal committee. So Akansha, the question for you is, we know that the PoSH Act requires a minimum number of women and a senior female member as the presiding officer. But many organizations struggle with this, especially male dominated sectors or maybe startups. So, what practical solutions or workarounds have you seen that still uphold the law's intent?
It's a very practical, what we say, difficulty that everybody, most of them are facing. But I really feel that it is very good that they are facing it. To be very frank, is because once they face it, they understand the importance of having a gender neutral board table to grow the company and the culture that needs to be developed. Until this is not forced on them, somehow it gets forgotten. And maybe it's only a chair that is being offered always on the board and not the voice for the female members, or maybe to make the board or the leadership at a neutral level. So definitely, this is a bit like an eye opener to everybody when this compliance needs to be done. And therefore, I'm very happy about this compliance, to be very frank. Now, what can be done if you are a male biased industry? I understand that maybe some of the industry engineering sectors and all, they manufacturing sectors mostly are male dominant sectors, and what to do at that time? There are a few things. You can have multiple IC members, like one or two, who could be females and who can help you balance the entire majority compliance in that sense. And if that is not the case, you can also make and grow, or you can nurture your mid-level female staffs that are there so that they can sit on that table and help us out with the compliance. Even if it's a male dominated industry that you are into, and if you struggle with this question often, or you're struggling with this question, glance through your entire leadership also wants to see, do you really need to make your company, your startup, a bit more open for everybody and a bit more inclusive? Because ultimately, even if you do lots of strategies, if the culture is not going to get built at the starting of the startup, your growth rate will affect eventually. So think about that too.
I love how you connected inclusivity with this issue. It's really an eye opener. I mean, it's making me question, how we work at different levels. I mean, seriously, it's such a broader problem that we need to look
Right.
into. Thank you. Thank you so much for that perspective, Akansha. The next question for you, Sarita, is how does your organization decide who should be on the IC, especially balancing seniority, neutrality, and trustworthiness? And once selected, what kind of preparation or training do they receive to actually handle such a sensitive responsibility?
Shri, in our organization and even in my previous organization, when we are looking at forming the internal committee, I think the first question that we are asked is that we have to go ahead and pick up all the senior members in the organization that have stayed for more than 3 or 5 years or 10 years and holding pretty senior roles in the company where they have an influence, right? So definitely, because that's going to add value, because internal committee needs that kind of maturity, intelligence, patience to go through the investigation process and ensure that you're fair in the process, right? You're not judgmental when you start investigating the complaints that you receive, right? So we put a lot of thought into who joins the internal committee, right? And the skill that we would look for, I would say this is more of something that we go by our gut feeling, right? We look for the empathy, the maturity, and the courage to handle these sensitive matters, right? And we try and maintain diversity as far as possible, right? Because again, right, as a HR, we get to decide if there is a senior gentleman who can be included, but does not carry that kind of you know uh, uh, unbiased decision, because we would have seen them making such decisions in different forums within the company, right? So we are choosy there, and then this is something that we discuss at a leadership level, and management team has been really supportive when we bring up these kind of a discussions, when we are selecting the internal committee members. So we try to maintain the diversity as far as possible. Otherwise, it is, I would say, 70% of them in the internal committee would be the female employees representation, right? And obviously, we have an external member as a legal advisor, who would also, ensure that all our internal committee members are trained, right? Uh, there is a half-yearly training that happens, right? And in case if they have any questions, right, we tell them that they can always come back and check with me or check with the external member, right, before an investigation process is initiated, right? And definitely, apart from this, the team does undergo the formal PoSH assessment process training to ensure that they fully understand, right, what are the do's and don'ts when you're investigating a case, right? And how do you ensure that you maintain confidentiality, right? Even if it is something that is getting reported within your team.
Wonderful. So you have a special PoSH assessment for IC members as well, just to check if they have.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's how you really know whether your IC knows.
Yeah, they exactly.
Wonderful. I'm definitely going to implement this this assessment for IC members, because
Thanks, Sri.
yeah, it's really wonderful.
That's an
Thanks.
additional layer for us to know and be sure that the team that we have selected in the internal committee are aware of their roles and responsibilities as I see.
Absolutely. It's such a huge responsibility at the end of the day. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay. So now let's move to the next round, that is the complaint filing stage. So Akansha, the question for you is, filing is not always straightforward, like we know. So how should ICs deal with cases where the complainant hesitates to file, or where the complaint comes anonymously, or through a bystander, or beyond the timeline? What are the legal and practical dilemmas here, and how do we work around it?
So I always feel that the IC should also, mostly when the complaint starts and when the oral discussion starts, that this event has happened, but I'm not sure whether I can put it in writing or not. At that time, I think it's definitely required that an IC also wears a hat of a counselor along with the HR in the company or the organization, who is quite close to the employees or the complainant who has to be there, and try to have a counseling session first to make the person understand how the process is going to happen, and kind of give them a belief or maybe a faith that the complaint is not for any political reason, but it is a genuine reason to protect somebody's integrity or the trauma that he has faced. So it helps most of the time. And I know that even after that, it's not helpful. I mean, some people don't come up and they give it in writing. But I also feel that it's still a win-win situation if suppose somebody in your organization is at least coming up orally and letting you know that this is happening in your premises or in your company. It really gives you a better hand to deal it in future. So this is what is, I still think it's a green sign, even if it doesn't get converted into a written complaint. But after the point where you ask about 3 months thing, you need to always understand after 3 months, if somebody is coming, and just because the 3 months are passed off, don't stuff the complaint under the carpet of the technicalities, because the PoSH Act always says that you need to uphold the spirit of the Act and not the total technicalities that goes on. The reason why the spirit needs to be upheld in this case is because the trauma the person could have faced For some, it could have been very easy to come out of it in 1 or 2 weeks, but some might take time. And maybe after the 3 months or 4 months, if they realize I am not able to come out of it because I have not raised a complaint or I need a closure for it, I think it's always better to give a chance to such kind of complaints also, but definitely understand what exactly is the grievance or what exactly is the gravity of the situation. So if such complaints comes during appraisal and all, and is the facts correct after 3 or 4 months, or it's just a complaint? So I see really have to be very clever at that time, empathetic as well as a bit detective to understand whether this complaint can be given a spirit of law exception in this case.
Absolutely. And we have also seen recently in one of the Supreme Court judgments how this, because of this technicality, a complaint was sort of waived off.
Yeah.
But as you rightly pointed out, it takes a lot of courage for the complainant to actually come up and file a complaint. And just because of technicality, if it gets waived off, it's really unfortunate. Thanks, Akansha. Sarita, the next question for you is, this is like a common question that we have in every PoSH webinar. That is, from your experience, what red flags or challenges come up when handling potentially malicious complaints? And how can ICs balance discouraging misuse without silencing genuine complainants?
It's a very tough question, Sri. I just hope that I don't have people from my company who are listening to this, right? Because I want to quote an example, and I totally 100% agree with what Akansha just mentioned, right? Sometimes complaints can be linked to performance discussions, right? Or interpersonal friction, right? Definitely, IC committee members would actually, look at the red flags but will avoid the assumptions, right? That is where the bias and unbiased thing would come into play, and the maturity that they have to exhibit, right? So every complaint is investigated based on the facts and the evidences, right? While we do that initial round of verbal conversation first to understand, how and when it started, right? We do communicate that false or malicious complaints are a violation under the law, right? And we do emphasize this in a way that doesn't silence basically the genuine voices, right? So I want to quote an example here, Shri, right? And I want to keep it really generic. So there was this complaint I dealt in past, right, where we had a case, right, where a female employee filed a harassment complaint soon after a obvious disappointing appraisal conversation and the salary increment that she saw, right? So when we started investigating the case, the inquiry kind of revealed that both the individuals had shared a friendly rapport, right? And all the messages that we saw were kind of mutual, right? It did not indicate, right, any of the behaviors that would constitute under the PoSH Act, right? And there was no indication of any unwelcome kind of a behavior, right? And I think when we got into the investigation took almost 2 months time, because it was not easy for us to collate all the digital evidences, the text messages, the WhatsApp messages, and all, right? And then internal committee recognized that this has to be handled with a lot of sensitivity with both the parties, right? And then we found that the complaint was reactive to an event where an employee received an salary increment letter, and that's when all of these things got reported. And that's when we spoke to both the parties, right, jointly after investigating and talking to them individually, looking at all the evidences. And this kind of brought in that kind of, we reinforce the message, right, that we want to be fair with both the parties, right? We heard both of you, right? And that's where we had to kind of dismiss the entire, complaint that came up, right? And both the parties agreed to it. And that's where we also, had to mentor the reporting manager that, when you kind of give any kind of commitments with respect to the salary increases or any kind of a promotions, you need to be very clear in stating that, what qualifies an individual for a promotion or a salary increase, right? And salary increases are not something that you can commit because you don't know what is the kind of a budget that the company is going to approve, right? So this is. I mean, that's the reason, when Akansha was talking about the performance management, majority of the cases that we see is around that period. So boom, we receive all these complaints, and then we know, okay, we can expect this.
So is it I mean that obvious? Like you actually apprehend that these kind of complaints would come up after an appraisal session or something?
Yeah, if there's a complaint that's happening right after your appraisal cycle, it's very evident.
Okay.
I think
Another reason.
organization should be prepared that maybe this is the time the complaints will come, and we should start investigating really what exactly was it. So be prepared is the only answer, I guess, for this.
I totally agree with you, Akansha.
Another reason that we have seen, like many experts have spoken about, is often due to personal relationships where there are breakups and all, especially in universities. Do you agree to that? Is that another one of like major cause for false complaints?
Yes, it is. And also, relationships are complicated. And sometimes, both the parties, the maturity doesn't come into picture, or not just the maturity, the feelings and the emotions where somebody is not able to digest where the consent was withdrawn. So that boundary line, when is being suddenly drawn in any of the relationship, I think it's difficult for both the parties to handle. So uh, such kind of complaints can be malicious or can be real, but then the facts needs to be checked, like when the boundary was done. And I think in this kind of thing, a counseling session to both the parties to understand uh, and deal their emotions in a better way helps rather than going in the punishment ways. That's what the ICs should also think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really like how you're emphasizing on having a counselor, because this aspect often gets not very much in the limelight. It's usually the legal and the HR that dive into the complaint, but not the. A very critical aspect is the what the counselor would play.
Right, right.
All right. Moving on to the fourth round, which is about redressal processes. So, Akansha, the question for you would be conciliation is legally permitted, but in reality, it raises difficult questions about consent and fairness. So, what are the biggest pitfalls ICs should avoid, and what practices make conciliation effective without becoming coercive?
So most of the time I have seen the ICs would like to go or keep on emphasizing on conciliation when the party or when the person is not ready to do a written complaint, or they are hesitant about actually writing the complaint and taking the entire process. So I have seen ICs talking to them about it. At least come and write, and we'll try to finish it in the conciliation. Going this way is also totally wrong, because the decision of the conciliation needs to be taken by both the parties mutually, like the accused and also the complainant. So it's not a one person's decision at all. And ICs should not play any role except for explaining what the conciliation is actually to make them undergo the conciliation, or kind of keep on emphasizing on the positive points of the conciliation, that it will get over in 2 days, 3 days, and it won't go into your files or something like that. IC should play a very neutral role while explaining the conciliation, and should allow both the parties to take a decision whether they want to go for a conciliation or not. I understand in some of the cases it is easy, or when the gravity of the case is not that serious, conciliation helps a lot to both the parties to come into a quick closure. But even in that case, it should be the party's decision, and none of them should be forced to do the conciliation. Also, if the senior management is like some senior management person is an accused in some of the cases, the conciliation way is sorted out more evidently. It should also be stopped, because you never know when the investigation comes up, what all can bring up and can save your company in actual manner, from because of the abuse of the senior manager or management person who is there in the company, and it will save your company in a long run. So don't ever take a biased route of conciliation because it is easy. Let the decision be taken by the parties involved in this.
So, do you see, do you think that the complainant needs to be made aware that yes, conciliation is something that is there? Because I don't think many people would know what is conciliation, what is inquiry, just by reading the PoSH policy.
No,
So,
it is a mandatory process. You will have to, because when the complainant comes to you with a written complaint, IC's one of the roles and responsibilities of the IC is to explain to them what exactly will happen, and also to tell them that conciliation is the first part, and then the investigation comes second if the conciliation option is not chosen. So when you are telling the process, you just tell the process as like you are reading a book, a manual to somebody. Do not give your pros and cons or your own expert opinion on, if you choose conciliation, these are pros and cons. If you choose investigation, these are pros and cons. Of course, the person coming to you will ask, what will happen next? What will happen next? Just be neutral and tell them that this is what will happen. I am not sure, but the person, of course, coming to your table is mature enough to understand the pros and cons themselves. So, just like reading a manual, tell them the process. Do not give your active opinion on what should be done by the complainant or the accused.
right. Just another follow-up question, Kansha. So, is it necessary to take permission from the respondent as well, or if the complainant wants conciliation, can IC actually proceed?
So here there is a bit technical, or this is a bit gray area in the investigation. So if the complainant wants to have a conciliation, um, and the accused says no, I want now, since I have been accused of, the case should be run and investigated so that I prove that I am innocent. Of course, the accused also should be given that chance, because fair trial is the right of everybody, not just the complainant. It is a right that is given to the accused also. He might be innocent, we never know. So the best thing is, not to be biased. I always tell all the IC members, don't be biased because it's a female oriented thing, or somebody comes with you or to you for a complaint. There could be lots of stories and incidents that has happened or will come up between it. So stop being biased and give fair chance to both. That includes that the accused should also have a right to say whether he wants to go for a conciliation or not.
Understood. So the spirit of the law has to be
Spirit of the law and the fair trial right rules need to be
understood.
taken into consideration.
Thanks, Akansha. Sarita, the next question for you is, inquiry is often the most difficult stage. So from your experience, what are the practical challenges from gathering evidence to dealing with senior respondents, and what best practices have helped your organization to ensure fairness and credibility?
Inquiries in PoSH, trust me, is never easy, right? Whether it is coming from, you know, the senior resources or the junior resources, right? So inquiry is where, the internal committee's maturity is tested, right? Whether you're looking through the digital evidences that, the compliant must have submitted, right, along with the email that they would have reported to the PoSH TA, right? And also ensuring that, you maintain the confidentiality throughout the investigation process, right? And especially, when we talk about a complaint on the senior officials, right? There should not be any kind of a seniority based bias, right? And there are sometimes recurring challenges that we face, and that is one reason when we have such kind of a complaints raised on, at leadership level or at a manager level, right? We have at least three people from the internal committees from different divisions who would participate in the entire investigation process. And we will also ensure that there is a HR representation, right? That is well trained on the PoSH Act, and also somebody who is actually aiming to join the internal committee, right? So we follow a detailed checklist right from the time we would have received a complaint, right? And one is, first you acknowledge that, okay, we understand whatever has been reported, right? And throughout the process until the closure, every interaction is documented, and all the evidences that are collected are made available with all the three internal committee members that are participating in the entire investigation process, right? And we also ensure that from the second or the third level conversations that we have, especially that I'm talking about the meetings that we have, right? We ensure that even the external member is also participating, because external member for us is completely unbiased, right? So we ensure that the external member is also participating throughout this investigation process, irrespective of the complaint reported either on the junior resources or on the senior officials, right? And we had a couple of challenges, just not from my experiences, but something that I have learned even in different PoSH workshops that I remember is, I think there was one situation where somebody gave an example of the restructuring exercises that the companies go through, right? So during one such restructuring exercises, I believe an employee happened to report on her immediate reporting manager, and that was kind of a little weird one, because it could be actually debated in different ways, right? So I believe the reporting manager used to make her stay back late in the evening, handle unplanned deliverables repeatedly, which she found little intimidating and being unfair, right? So the internal committee investigated the matter thoroughly, I believe, and looked at all the data, right? And they also did, I believe, one-on-one conversations with the other team members in the same project, just to establish if what the employee is talking or reporting about a reporting manager is true or not, right? And that was kind of confirmed. And when the manager was confronted with all the evidences, and then all the reports that were retrieved from the digital systems and all, right, the manager kind of had no choice but then agreed to it. So in this situation, I believe the manager was terminated after all the findings were confirmed, right? And at the same time, I think a very important thing here is that this did not affect the entire restructuring exercise in the company, because both the situations were kind of handled completely separately. And I would say that I think here the internal committee demonstrated that kind of a maturity by keeping business changes and the employees' complaint independent of each other, right? And also ensuring that you're fair to both the parties, right? Which kind of reaffirmed that when evidence is clear, right, company acts decisively and without bias. I
Absolutely.
hope I was able to give you some insight on this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for sharing these nitty-gritties. It really helps. All right, moving on to the final round. So, Akansha, the question for you would be, when a respondent is found guilty, punishments can range from warnings to termination. But in practice, do you see organizations applying consistent standards, or does it vary across different industries?
It definitely varies from um, industry to industry, but mostly it depends also on the gravity or what exactly the complaint is. So, for example, I'll tell you, if the complaint is about staring, though it's a sexual harassment and it's a staring complaint. Sometimes warning is enough, or warnings are just given, and that punishment seems to be suitable. But if I have also seen that if the culture of the companies are not going well, and unfortunately the accused person is also under some politics that is going on in the company and all, and the complaints are not being confidentially handled, the only warning punishments can aggravate to somebody something more. So for punishments kind of thing, also have seen some of these cases that maybe the complaint is very grave and the accused needs to be punished. He will be punished, but he is also important for business. So at that time, because of his skill set, he is important. Company cannot afford to actually lose the person. The punishment nature of the punishment also changes in that way. So this biasness I have seen in lots of companies and the ICs that goes on. So for this, I think the company should actually keep, or when the ICs decides, or when the case comes up, at that time upfront, only the IC should think about that while doing the investigation. Even before starting the investigation, a parameter needs to be set between the IC that if suppose the complaint or the conclusion of this case is going to be grade A, grade B, grade C, this punishments will be given. And I think it is also very much important to make a clarity to both the parties that if the conclusion is going to be this is what is going to be the end result. So since everybody is going to be there involved in the process and again the fair trial thing, it becomes easy for everybody to know, okay, fine, this is what is going to be the conclusion or it should be the punishment for it. The standard or the benchmark for your company and the organization automatically gets set once you start doing this. So even see the complaint or the PoSH IC is a district court level, or it's been said that they are a district judge. Powers have been given to them. So when you go to the district judge, and you know if this is the offense, you know what is the punishment that or max punishment that district judge can give to you because it's there in the book of laws. Similarly, if since it's not there in the book of laws or in your policies, just don't ignore this fair trial component and please have it beforehand only when the complaint comes to you so that the ICs are also not accused of being biased or such kind of influences will not come into picture when actually the punishment time comes.
Understood. Just a follow-up question, Akansha. The law says that IC recommends certain actions and the employer has to implement it. But practically, have you seen that there's a negotiation between the employer, the management, and the IC where the probably the management does not agree with the punishment that is being recommended. Does it happen?
Yeah, I have seen tussles where definitely when I say that maybe the person, who has a very great skill and is very good for the business, definitely it comes into the consideration, oh, this is the one, he is very critical for the project, or HR beforehand says that he is a critical for project, what to do one. So this definitely comes up in it. I have seen such cases. In such cases, max what I have seen organization adapting it to it, and it should be is to give a bit more grace time to implement the punishment. So, like if the punishment was supposed to be done immediately, they give more, maybe 15 or 20 more days to implement the punishment. So the business, or maybe and it's practical. I'm not blaming anyone over here. So the business is not affected or your organization is not affected by the skill set, but I think 20 days are more than enough to replace anybody in any organization to do all the knowledge transfer or take away the skill set. So yes, the timelines changes, but and it is fair enough, practical enough, but don't change the punishment just because management is negotiating.
Perfect, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you, Akansha. Thanks for confirming it. Okay, the
I
final.
wanted to
Yes,
I wanted to
yes,
add to what Akansha mentioned, Shri.
absolutely.
I think I'm actually talking for the IT organizations, right? So we don't use word called punishment, but we would say that the consequences of such kind of investigations, right? Uh, at least I've been fortunate to have worked with companies where the board is very supportive, right? And the decision making happens at IC level. Yes, in such cases where Akansha mentioned that if the resource is critical to the business, they will buy time. But in IT, what we do is an immediate termination happens where the access and all is revoked. Yes, in terms of KT and all, that is managed separately, which is completely offline. So that's something that I wanted to just add.
Very practical solution. Thanks, Sarita, for sharing it. Uh, okay, so we move on to the final question for you, Sarita. The PoSH law requires every IC to prepare and submit an annual report, but often organizations struggle with timeliness and completeness. So, what procedure does your IC follow to ensure it is submitted on time and meets all statutory requirements?
Yeah, this is the compliance for all the companies, and mandatorily we have to follow because it's one of our audit requirement in HR, right? So the annual report is a statutory requirement. Definitely, we all know about it, right? But as you rightly mentioned, many companies actually struggle with the timeliness, right? So what we have done in our company is we have established a process wherein every January, right, HR and the IC will set up a compliance calendar with the milestones, right, that we have recorded over a period of time, right? Uh, Data that need to be captured when we submit the annual report, right? That includes the number of cases, resolutions, the awareness sessions that we would have done, and any kind of a pending inquiries that we'll have to capture in the annual reports. And before we submit, obviously the draft is reviewed by me, and we also take the inputs from our external members, right? Just to ensure that it is complete before we go ahead and submit to the district officer, right? And all this is kind of taken care. So we have an SLA of 15 days. So I think over the last couple of years, we've ensured that this is submitted on or before 25th of Jan. And I hope this answers your question. But one thing that, since, and first and foremost, Sri, I forgot to mention this. Thank you for giving this opportunity, right? I think we all have to ensure that PoSH is not just viewed as a compliance, right? At the end of the day, uh, PoSH is just not about audits or compliance, right? But I would say it's about ensuring that the system is alive, responsive, and everybody has a trust in us, right? And PoSH is about creating a culture of trust and respect where people feel safe to speak, and they're assured that the process is going to be fair at all the levels. I think that is what I keep talking about, and we do have a lot of internal arguments. While I think Akashan did rightly quote that when it comes to a critical resource, there are a lot of challenges that we have to deal with, right? Because they'll try to get into the nitty gritties of what is right, what is wrong, and they'll try to take stand, right? Then we have to push back and we have to give that empowerment only to the internal committee to make a decision and not the others in the company.
Absolutely. Very rightly said, Sarita. I just have a follow-up question on the annual report. Often we have seen there's there's a bit of miscommunication regarding who should take the initiative. Is it the IC or is it the employer who should actually file it at the district officer's office? So, do you have you decided whose role is what? And
Yeah. So in our company, it is HR. So HR will ensure that they'll follow with the internal committee before they start preparing the annual report. And it is the accountability of the HR team to ensure that, the annual report captures all the details along with the evidences just to ensure that, it is secure for any kind of a future audits.
perfect, perfect. Thanks, Sarita. We now open the floor for audience questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, this is the time. Please drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'd also like all of you to, I'll invite you to join our Global Compliance Leaders Network, or we call it as GCLN, and we have a small WhatsApp group where we regularly share resources, case laws, and best practices on workplace compliance, including PoSH. So it's a great way to stay connected and continue these conversations. So if you are interested, I'll just share the link on the chat. You can join this WhatsApp group. We do not spam, so rest assured that your inbox won't be flooded. All right, looks like we have covered most of the questions and there are no doubts. So we'll then wrap up the session. Thank you. Also, before we wrap up, I'll take a minute to mention that if any of you want to take this conversation further and want to implement PoSH awareness sessions, we do have several e-learning courses also in regional languages. So if any of you want to know more, then please reach out to us after the session. But thanks a lot to the speakers for sharing such concrete real world strategies. These are the kinds of insights because of which we are doing this Safe Workplaces Dialogues every month. And thanks a lot, audience, for joining us today. Let's keep these conversations going. And
we have some question.
Yes, absolutely. Please, please. Sorry, I missed it. Sometimes evidences may not be clear or exactly available. Yeah, so basically the question is, where there's a lack of evidence, how do you go about it? Would you like to take it up, Akansha or Sarita?
So PoSH cases are tricky. You will never get a very strict evidences in these cases because the activity or the event will always, or most of the time, happen behind the closed doors in the secluded areas. So definitely getting those details or the evidences is not, or exact evidences is not always possible. But there are supplementary evidences that IC can gather. I think when you are doing this IC trainings, IC are trained on how to rely on other source of evidences, and that can be taken into consideration to go ahead with it. So I mean, just because there's no evidence, the case cannot go ahead is never a case, at least for the PoSH.
Yeah, I think Shri, adding on to what Akansha mentioned, uh, definitely without evidences, it's going to be really difficult for the IC members to close the investigation because it will be seen as an unfair and biased process, right? So we would look for some kind of evidences. Typically, at least in our investigation, that what we have seen is we also look into the evidences that are not formal in nature, right? So even informal evidence is something that they can share it in confidentiality, right? We do rely on them before we probably look at closing the investigation. Otherwise, there's another way of looking at it is we'll have to sensitize both the parties in a situation where there's no concrete evidence, right? Because we cannot close, and we just have to go ahead and have both the parties reconcile, with the matter being reported with some kind of a formal warning being given. I hope Akansha you will agree with me on this.
Yes, yes, I agree. And I mean, evidence is a topic which is really a case-based topic to be discussed about. It cannot be summed up in a generic question or the forum right now. You really need like 1 or 2 hours just to talk on the evidence.
True, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, next question from Sumalata. In case of gender neutral policy, when there is a complaint from a male against female, do we still record this?
It depends on the company policy because if it is not coming under PoSH, the PoSH Act is not going to get applied. So what exactly is your company policy? According to me, it should replicate the same policy that what it is. The only thing is you don't file it in the annual report. That should be the only difference. But this is my opinion. I think do you want to record it or not? It depends upon what your organization policy is there to safeguard the male folks from the harassment.
Right. Umesh Kumar has a question. As per the PoSH Act, fee for external member is very less. How do you manage? That is so true.
How do you manage or how do you manage? It's again, it depends upon the credibility of the IC member that you have chosen. I know people who are taking like a very, very high fee also for just being an IC member. Apart from that, I also know some of the folks who are doing it for free just to give back to the society. So it depends upon what culture you want to set up for your organization. And it's mostly rather than the external member's choice, it is your organization who needs to choose from the market who is the right IC for you or who is the right external member for you because it depends upon everything, not just your will. It depends upon the budget. It also depends upon the experience of the person who is being approached about. So just because it is very less, how do you manage? Some of them are doing it for free. So I don't know how they are managing, but it's depends upon. I think it's a very personal question for each individual to answer and each organization to take into consideration their needs.
It's not strictly followed, I think, the fact that a
Payment
certain
payment thing is not strictly followed, and there's no mandatory rule also about it. If you
Right.
don't want to go for it, even have an external thing and all, the company or the government has a policy of you can just go to the local policies or free portals where they will give you assistance if you really don't have that kind of have an external member. You. So that's also the case.
right.
We are the government organization. That's why such issues comes in front of us. because we go by the act and rules mentioned in the PoSH rules, PoSH Act. So that's why I was asking ki you all are working in the different field, different organization. Maybe you will be the external member or something like that. So how things are happening there. So a similar pattern we can also
Yeah.
implement for our organization.
Right. So for Umesh, for definitely for government organization, few of the ministries or few of the states have their own IC member list that is already there selected with them, or empaneled IC external members, they are already there with them. Most of the government sectors are being asked or is being told to choose one of the external member from the empaneled uh, members only with the ministries or with the particular state government. So if it's a government sector altogether, it depends upon what notification has come to you on how to choose your external member. For private sector, of course, they have a more free hand to choose from whatever they want to. But for government sector, it is mostly mandatory to choose from the empaneled members with some of the government authorities or the state government authorities.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
We have a question from Sandhya. If IC members are split in opinion when there is no clear evidence or conclusion, what is the best way forward? It's a tricky one.
Yes. Indeed, it's a tricky one. I think then you'll have to get into the level of details from the reason as to why they have split opinions, right? And I think this is where the presiding officer's role would come into play.
Right. Also, would you agree that when an IC is formed, we should have it in odd numbers, like 3 or 5, so that there's no tie as such?
Yes,
Yeah.
recommend that. Yeah, I always recommend that have a odd number. So it is always easy for such conflicts.
Oh, this is a good input for me, Akansha.
Okay, Sumalata is asking, knowing the fact of any reason, do we still encourage malicious complaint? Suma, could you clarify, could you elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, hi Shrimoi.
Yes.
See, I was just hearing to Aransha, Sarita, right, in her organization during the performance period. So there are expected the cases which turns out to be malicious on the grounds of the performance. So still we know the fact of the performance. Do we still encourage the malicious? That's not fair, right? See, because you're going to tamper or the person's image in the organization. That's not fair, right? So on what grounds we decide is a malicious or not?
Suma, first and foremost, we cannot get biased with the complaints that get reported, especially to the PoSH committee, right? So, for us to come to a conclusion whether it was a malicious intent, right, we'll have to investigate the case. So, once we get into the investigation process, that's when we learn about the intent or the reason or the purpose, right? We try to go ahead and send out or sensitize through different email campaign in the company to ensure that people understand their rights, what constitutes under the act, and what should be taken more like a concern on the performance management process. I hope I was able to address your question, Suma.
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's another question from Suma that when a term is defined for an external member, if they wish to continue with the same external member, how do we record this?
For this, I always say that the act is very much silent about the renewal process. But if you go for a fair trial, there needs to be a break of service for anything. So even if the break of service is for 15 days, keep that vacancy for 15 days and reappoint after the term, that is 3 years. This is applicable even for the IC members, because I know whenever there is a startup and all, they just form the IC member in the beginning, and these are getting continued years to years altogether because they are trained and they don't need.
Unless somebody quits.
Somebody quits or there are new. I mean, the training thing and all is getting saved up if you are just done by one. But I think even if there is a vacancy for 15 days or something like this in your organization, it's better to keep that vacancy and then form at least a renewal thing by giving a break to the term, because reappointment is not prohibited, but following a fair practice and showing that you are being reasonable enough is. So 3 years, then maybe whatever break you think is suitable for your organization, and then the reappointment would be the best way to tick mark on the term and following the process altogether.
Right. Thank you, audience, for asking these questions. We really got to explore some of the points that we had missed out during the main body of the session. Thanks a lot, speakers, for sharing your insights. I thoroughly enjoyed the session and learned so many new things and tricks, especially the takeaway that the PoSH assessment for IC. That was
Yeah, that is my best one. I never thought that this can be done.
Absolutely. I think my IC is like the IC, our company's IC is a part of this session also, and they must be thinking, oh no, what's coming for us? But thanks a lot, guys. Loved the
Thank you,
session. Definitely would like to have you guys back soon.
Sure.
Thanks again. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Shri. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.